What is going on, everyone? Happy draft week. We made it. So good to be here. We are here as well with another video for the 2023 NFL draft. Today's going to be a fun one. We're going to be talking about my guys in this draft. These are players that I'm either higher on, or if I was drafting for these teams, I'd really be pounding the table saying, we got to get this guy in the building. Basically, these are 10 of my most favorite players in this draft class, which means I'm very excited to hype these guys up. Before we dive in, if you could do me a huge favor, please take a second to hit that like button down below. I really appreciate it. And make sure you're subscribed. I'm going to be live all draft weekend. You can join me here on YouTube for my reactions and analysis, live grades to every single pick throughout the weekend. It's going to be like 15 hours of streaming. It's going to be a blast. I'll see you guys there. But let's get into it. There's no particular order for this. In fact, I used a Google list randomizer just to kind of emphasize that this is not a 1 through 10 list. These are just 10 players that I'm excited to talk about. And let's start with wide receiver Michael Wilson out of Stanford. And consensus has him as more of a third or fourth round pick, the 16th wide receiver. I'm going to be showing the consensus ranks. This is based off of the consensus board from Mock Draft Database. But yeah, I've got him as a second round guy, my 7th wide receiver in this class. And, you know, I get it why people are lower on him. He was never a super productive receiver at Stanford. He dealt with injuries. Let's face it, that Stanford offense, even though they've produced some NFL quarterback prospects, the offense as a whole was not a dynamic, high volume passing game. So the stats, the production for Michael Wilson just aren't where you necessarily would want them to be for a second round pick. And surely those injury concerns are legitimate. And if you're worried about it, I get it. But you watch his tape, and this guy is truly one of the best route runners in this draft, especially in that short to intermediate part of the field. If you're running him on slants, dig routes, out routes, comebackers, his foot speed, his technique is impeccable. He's a bigger receiver at 215 pounds, something that's much harder to find in this draft class. So you're talking about a guy that is not going to be disturbed by physical press contact down the field. And talk about press, Michael Wilson has the best release grade in this class, and the best release grade that I've given a receiver in the last couple years, I believe, with an A grade from me. Both in technique, size, and foot speed are remarkable. All three things required to beat press coverage, Michael Wilson has it. He truly has a Davante Adams-esque feel about him when corners are trying to jam him. And this included when guys like Gonzalez out of Oregon went against him. He could not get his hands on Michael Wilson. So this is a player that I do think is going to separate at the next level. Now, he's not a burner. He ran a 4.58, and I don't think he's going to be like a true number one guy in all likelihood. But if you stick him on the outside as a number 2 receiver on a team that already has a vertical threat, teams that I love mocking him to are teams like Kansas City and Detroit in the second round, where they have their deep threats there. You put him on the outside as your X-wide receiver. He can play in the slot as well. And to wrap things up on Michael Wilson, my pro comp for him is Diet Davante Adams, and I get it. Those are big words. Now, emphasis on the diet part. Again, Davante Adams, a unique career trajectory. To project anybody to have that kind of path to becoming the best receiver in the NFL at a point in time is just probably not realistic. But when you watch Michael Wilson play, the way he moves, honestly, the way he wins relative to what Davante Adams was as a college prospect, who was a second-round pick out of Fresno State, it is freaky, not just in the tape, but the athletic tools as well. These guys are both the exact same size, 6'1.5", 214 pounds. Michael Wilson, a 2-time captain, a kind of psycho work ethic kind of guy by all accounts. So I'm not going to say it's impossible for him to be something like Davante Adams at the next level, but just from a skill set perspective, you think about the separation and maybe like a 2018, 2019 version of Davante Adams before the ball skills and all of that crazy chemistry with Aaron Rodgers really took that next level, where Davante was like a good high-end starting wide receiver. I think that sort of range is very much in play for Michael Wilson. And even likewise, Michael Wilson has some drops on tape. He's not the most dominant ball winner. Early career, Davante Adams had some ball skills issues. So I just see a very similar prospect, and it's very intriguing. To me, second round, really at any point, sign me up for Michael Wilson. And then we're going to stay at the wide receiver position for our next player here with Mitchell Tinsley out of Penn State. And I want to shout out Emory Hunt, football analyst, draft analyst, really football galore analyst, who had a great appearance on the Bootleg Football podcast, was really talking up Mitchell Tinsley, and that's what brought my eye to him. And I immediately fell in love with his game. And you're talking about a guy that is the consensus-ranked 39th receiver. This is a true sleeper type of guy that nobody's, well, Emory was talking about him, but for the most part, people are not talking about Mitchell Tinsley. And I mean, I don't like to obsess about pro comps, but when you see one like this in Kendrick Bourne, it really gets you excited. It just does, because watching him play at Western Kentucky and then at Penn State, I literally was like, wow, this guy's really similar to Kendrick Bourne. He's got kind of that lanky 6-foot frame. He's not the fastest guy, but he's quick. He's a solid route runner, but he's not out there like dotting dudes up with his routes. Where he wins is fighting through contact in his routes and really fighting through contact at the catch point, where he had a remarkable contested catch percentage in his time at college, at the two different schools that he was at. And ended up with a 60% contested catch percentage. That's like right where Kendrick Bourne has lived in his NFL career. It keeps going, though, with this comp, because those Niners fans, Patriots fans that have watched Kendrick Bourne, you know he is that tough guy in the short to intermediate field, pretty good after the catch, but just kind of a steady hand in that part of the field. And then you pull up Kendrick Bourne's physical profile and you compare it to where Mitchell Tinsley is at. And I don't remember a physical comp that is as close as these two players. So again, their play style and film is almost identical. Both guys probably going to, be 7th round or even undrafted free agent pickups. But you put these guys side by side. Tinsley is 6 foot to Kendrick Bourne 6'1", 200 pounds to 203 pounds. Both double-digit low-end bench reps, 14 to 10. But more so, you look at the arm length, 32.5 inches. The 40 time, 4.55 for both of them. Both of these guys ran a poor 40 at the combine and improved it at their pro day. 10-yard split, 157 to 156. It keeps going. Vertical jump, 35.5 to 36. Broad jump, 10 feet to 10 feet, 4 inches. And then the agility scores. The shuttle, almost the same, 414 to 421, and the 3-cone, 670 to 673. And the fact that Kendrick Bourne was a sleeper, went undrafted, had to climb up the depth chart, and prove that he could win in the same ways that Mitchell Tinsley does, I genuinely believe you can draft Kendrick Bourne in the 5th round of this draft. I don't remember a pro comp that is so close. And again, I was thinking Kendrick Bourne before I even pulled up the measurables. So I would absolutely take this guy early day 3 if you really felt the need was perfect. So definitely had to make Mitchell Tinsley my guy. And then my next guy is Will Levis out of Kentucky. And I have realized throughout this draft process, I didn't think I was going to be a guy that's high on Will Levis. I liked him. But as I've gone throughout, talking to a lot of other analysts and doing guest appearances and stuff, it's really become clear to me that I believe in Will Levis a lot more than other people out there. And he's my QB3 right now. But for me, I think I had to make him a my guy because to me, he's worth a top 5 pick. A lot of people don't seem to think that. A lot of people think he's going to be a bust. And his grade for me is extremely tight with CJ Stroud and Anthony Richardson. For me, it's more of just a matter of preference and fit with who the second guy off the board should be. But as I've said, really going back to February, he does not get enough credit for being as pro-ready as he is. Number one, we all talk about, how bad his surrounding situation, how bad the offensive line was, and how bad his production was. Yes, on one hand, you want to see him have more big-time throws, have higher production, but on the other hand, the fact that he had to speed up his processor and play at such a high speed is going to help him in the NFL. I can almost guarantee that he's going to have more time to throw and receivers that are more open in the NFL and probably more reasonable play calling in the NFL than he's going to have at Kentucky. So the speed of the game is not going to feel too fast for him. And I think this is where I went wrong on Zach Wilson, and a lot of people did. You watch him at BYU, and the one thing was like, okay, he has all day to throw back there. He has all day to think. And he got to the NFL, and the speed of the game was clearly just too fast for Zach Wilson. It's not going to happen with Will Levis. And this idea that he's this turnover machine and he's making stupid reads every week, it's just not true. He had 13 turnover-worthy plays per PFF in his final season. 4 of those came in the Tennessee game when he is clearly down 4 scores, trying to push and just make something happen in what was a disaster game. I can excuse those. Now, you know, if he's coming from behind, he's going to force bad mistakes and you know, take some risks. It's part of the game, man. I'd rather you do that than play it safe and get benched in the third quarter because you're so far out of it, right? So, like, I really think he's a better decision maker. He handled disguised coverages when they were rotating safeties, showing cover 3, ending up in quarters, vice versa. He was able to recognize those things and get to the right read very quickly. I also love the way he attacks the middle of the field. The 2 knocks on him are going to be the accuracy, which we've seen quarterbacks improve that, but maybe he will just not be a super consistently accurate thrower. He's got that super quick release. It can be tough to be consistent when you are flipping the ball with that flip of the wrist mechanic. We've seen that with guys like Zach Wilson. Aaron Rodgers has managed to be accurate with it, but he would be an outlier with that kind of a release. We see the same thing with Anthony Richardson, who has a similar style release in this draft. But the accuracy might be a little bit sporadic, but I don't think it's going to be so bad that he's going to suck, right? There just might be some inconsistent performances there because of the accuracy. And the pocket presence, he'll stand tall in the face of pressure, but oftentimes it's to a fault. He's not a creative quarterback. Even CJ Stroud, who gets criticism for some of this stuff, showed in the Georgia game, he's going to escape pressure when it's there. And in the case of Levis, he's gonna kind of stand tall in the pocket and make plays, but he's gonna have more opportunities to make those throws at the next level because the receivers are gonna be better and he's gonna have more time to do that. So to me, there's a rumor today that the Texans might take him with the 2nd overall pick. Based on my evaluation, I don't think that's crazy. If DeMeco Ryans and those guys are sitting down in the interview rooms and they feel like he's the best guy for them, ahead of CJ Stroud, ahead of Anthony Richardson, I can get behind that, and I think a lot of people are going to have a visceral reaction to that. I'm not. I can understand the process there. I think he's a really good quarterback prospect. We underrate surrounding talent way too often. And you go back to 2021 when he had an NFL-level offensive coordinator, he had solid playmakers, better pass protection, a much better season from Will Levis. So kind of reminds me a little bit of Jordan Love coming out, different in different ways, but that was similar with Jordan Love, and I was a big Jordan Love guy as well back in that draft. So yeah, Will Levis gonna make the My Guys list. We'll see how it goes. You know, this is one of those things that could totally blow up in my face, or I could look smart for it. We'll find out in a few years, I guess. Before we go any further, with football season really ramping up here with the draft this weekend, I got to tell you guys about Underdog Fantasy. Right now, you can launch your best ball fantasy leagues where it's draft, set it, forget it. I am such a big fan of this for a variety of reasons. But number one, if you're like me and you're in a million leagues, you can, but you just can't get enough fantasy football. You can do a best ball league, put your football knowledge to the test in a draft, and then you don't have to worry about it. They are going to set the best lineup every week. If you got injuries or whatever, they will play whoever played the best that given week. There's no week-to-week transaction. It is all about your football knowledge on draft day of your league. You can play in an individual league. You can play in these massive contests for huge payouts. But also, draft enthusiasts, you can get in there. If you think you have an edge with all of these receivers and running backs and quarters coming into the league, and you've been consuming all the draft content, and you think you have an edge over the average football fan that maybe is still catching up on a lot of these guys, there's not a better time than right now to sign up at Underdog Fantasy, get in on these best ball contests, and you can snipe the rookies that might be climbing up in a few weeks. And even better, if you sign up using promo code TFG right now, they will match up to $100 on your first deposit. You'll support my channel in the process. That's promo code TFG at Underdog Fantasy. Then the next guy I want to talk about is Zach Koontz out of Old Dominion, and consensus has gotten a little bit closer to where I am. Consensus has him as tight end 8. I have him 7th, but I was really in on him a little bit earlier, and I think I have I can take the right to claim him as a my guy here. This dude is quite literally the most athletic tight end to ever declare for the NFL draft on paper, and I would say Dalton Kincaid is like more functionally athletic. He's a smoother mover and all that stuff. I don't think the speed on tape is dramatically different, but you look at a guy with this sort of relative athletic score at 6'7", 255 pounds, you know there's some damn upside there. And you watch his tape, and this is why I really like Zach Koontz, because the upside is obvious. And, you know, the level of competition, the kind of only 1 year of good production, there's obvious reasons why he's a kind of boomer bust prospect. And you guys can go back to my tight end rankings video and see a little bit more about what I said about him. But what really justified Zach Koontz as my tight end 7 to me was his tape was better than I expected. It really was. I felt like he was a high effort blocker. He's going to struggle to create torque at that height. He's still putting on muscle. He hasn't really fully learned how to play at that 255 pounds. He's been gaining weight, 5 to 10 pounds a year for the last 3 or 4 years. So he's only just now reaching his physical prime. But I also expected to not see very smooth athleticism, and because sometimes these workout scores are deceptive if guys really train for it. But you did see the foot speed. You did see the long speed. You saw him pulling away from linebackers up the seam and on out routes, where I felt like he actually set up his routes really well and was creating separation at the position. He won some tough contested catches. He's got decent hands. There is a lot to work with in Zach Koontz. This is not some complete total moldable ball of clay. I don't feel that way. I think he has a baseline of tools for the position and is just starting to figure things out. So to me, once you kind of run out of those day one impact types of guys, talking about immediate, starters or contributors, and you get into the end of the third round, I'm looking at Zach Koontz as one of the best investments you can make because the upside for him is truly ridiculous. My high-end comp for him is Jimmy Graham, and my low-end comp is Zach Davidson. So I'm recognizing the risk here, but I think it's worth the risk, maybe with one of those compensatory third-round picks for a team. And think of Kansas City getting him to groom Koontz, but behind Kelsey for a couple of years. It could be something more of the same. And then we've got Tyreke Stevenson, the cornerback out of Miami. The consensus rankings have him down at 11th right now, not even as a top 10 corner. He's my 5th guy. He is, to me, for most systems, going to be the first guy that I'm thinking about if I miss out on that tier 1 of corners with Porter, Banks, Gonzalez, and Witherspoon. To me, Tyreke Stevenson, if you're Baltimore at 22, Minnesota at 23, Pittsburgh at 33, and you need a corner that can step in as a number 2 guy immediately, play press man coverage with good technique, poised ball skills, the ability to not get grabby when the ball is in the air, to get your head around, find the ball, make plays on the ball, a physical player with real size, real speed. Maybe he's never a number 1. I think he has the tools to get there. Physically speaking, reminds me a lot of Chidobe Awuzie or even Stephon Gilmore at times. There's flashes there. I'm a huge fan of his game. I think his projection is very straightforward, and I just think he's getting underrated in this draft class that has a lot of depth at corner. But you're looking at Tyreke Stevenson, to me, as the clear-cut next guy after that top group, and that, simply put, makes him a my guy for me. If you want weaknesses for him, it would be zone coverage. He had some coverage busts. If you are a zone-heavy team, you might prefer other guys, maybe like Emmanuel Forbes or even Cam Smith. I understand that. But I think zone is the most coachable part of cornerback. If you're talking about a guy that can handle physical route runners, get in guys' faces, press them at the line of scrimmage, and do that immediately, I think it's Tyreke Stevenson. So I think NFL teams have a good chance of realizing this as well. I think he could come off the board somewhere in those top 35 picks, and that may or may not be a hot take. Some other people are high on him as well, but still seeing him down there at the consensus ranking of 11, I had to include Stevenson on this list. And then number 6 is another guy that's in that kind of late first, early second range is DeJuan Jones out of Ohio State. And I don't know if this is Mekhi Becton fatigue or what, but I see, honestly, a player that I like better than Mekhi Becton coming out in DeJuan Jones. He's my tackle 4, so I have him ahead of certainly Anton Harrison, and I have him ahead of Darnell Wright as well. And consensus has both those guys above DeJuan Jones, so I'm definitely higher on him, and I find myself defending him quite a lot. This guy is a true behemoth in terms of size, not just at 6'8", 375 pounds, but the wingspan is absurd. I think he has like a 7'3" wingspan. This is what's interesting. The wingspan, the size. He's a former power forward. He was a college basketball recruit. He has a good basketball background. Apparently, he would get down like 40 pounds to play basketball in the offseason and then put the weight back on, which is interesting to me because I don't know if I want him playing at 375, but maybe that's where he's comfortable playing. And the thing to me is yes, he is relative to the normal athlete at this position is a below average athlete. But at 375 pounds, that's very understandable. But when I watch his tape, of course, he's big, he's a little bit plodding, but he can still move. Sometimes you see these giant tackles in college and they just literally cannot shuffle. They can't get depth in their kick slides. They can't get off the ball and move guys against the run. That is not the case with DeJuan Jones. He does fly off the ball. He does have burst out of his kick slide to get depth. And you pair and he has his foot speed is a concern, but it's enough that with his reach, his wingspan, he's got 36.5-inch arms. Even if he's a half step behind, and I think it is a half step, not a full step, and I think that's important, he still has decent reaction time to, deal with quick hitting pass rush moves laterally. But even if he is a half step, he is so unbelievably strong in his arms. He's accurate with his hands, and he's got great core strength. So even if he's a little bit behind, if he's trying to cut off an inside move, or if he's a half step late to react to the edge, he can block when he's out of balance. And it's really impressive to me what he can do when he gets those bear claws on dudes. And I think that's going to translate to the next level. There is a profile of guys at this size really playing well at the next level. Mekhi Becton has dealt with injury issues, and that's held him back, but he's been okay when he's been out there. But much better comps are guys like Trent Brown and Orlando Brown, who sure have the occasional physical limitations. Some matchups, they just can't handle the speed of certain guys. But you think about Orlando Brown and Trent Brown, you're taking that player at the end of the first round or the top of the second round every day of the week. I think comparing him to, for me, it's an easy explanation with him over Anton Harrison, who I just view as much more of a project. But even to a guy like Darnell Wright, most people aren't going to have these guys super close, and I even have Jones over Darnell Wright. I actually think DeJuan Jones is a better pass protector. I think he understands and has better instincts in that regard. I think the length shows up more. But I also like the way he sustains blocks a lot more. And part of this is I just think Darnell Wright is slightly overrated. I think he leans too much in run blocking. He's not as sticky as a run blocker as a guy like DeJuan Jones. So I think it's important to distinguish why I'm a little bit higher on Jones there. But I do compare him to Trent Brown. I think he can start at right tackle right away. He's going to get a very nice second contract. So DeJuan Jones, and then my next guy is going to be another offensive lineman, Jordan McFadden out of Clemson, who is like the complete opposite of DeJuan Jones. He's a late round prospect. Consensus has him as the 14th tackle. I've got him 11th. So people do like this guy. But he reminds me so much of, some mix of what Zach Tom was last year, who was drafted in the 4th round, was a quality starter right away for Green Bay, incredibly technically sound. And then a little bit of like Jamari Sawyer, who again, undersized tackle, falls into the 5th round, steps in for the Chargers right away, and is just fine. Another guy he kind of reminds me of is Isaiah Wynn, who's been a really sound starter for the Patriots, was drafted in the 1st round. Very similar physical profile to Jordan McFadden. McFadden a little bit on the lighter side. He's only 6'2", and that size is going to be a concern for some teams, but like it shows up in his anchor. He just doesn't have the raw mass to hold up against high-end power rushers, and that is probably going to hold him back from being a dominant tackle at the next level, or even a dominant guard potentially, because he could have some of that positional flexibility. But you talk about a guy that is got that natural leverage at 6'2". If you're 6'2", a lot of these guys have 32-inch arms, and you can't get your hands on opposing pass rushers before they take control of you. And when you're that small, that's not good, right? You want to be able to strike first and get the upper hand from a technical standpoint. Jordan McFadden has 34-inch arms, so he can do that. And he doesn't just have the length, he uses it really well. He places it on the outside shoulder. He mixes up his punches. He's accurate with his hands. He's strong with his hands. He was a really efficient pass protector. Reminded me so much of a guy like Zach Tom last year, though Tom was a little bit taller. And as a run blocker, likewise, like good athlete off the ball. The natural leverage helps him. He gets his hands inside. He runs his feet. He sustains blocks really well. He doesn't have that natural power to drive guys, but he's pretty bulky. Like he can still move guys. I think he's going to be a really sound, efficient pass protector. Certain matchups, if he ends up having to face Myles Garrett or Rashawn Gary, Joey Bosa, that's going to be a problem. He just doesn't have the physical manpower to handle those guys. A lot of tackles don't. He's probably not an ideal long-term starter. But for me, a guy with potentially 5-position flexibility, he's got a ton of experience. I think he could play center. In the 4th, 5th round, you're getting a guy that I think is the ideal 6th man for your offensive line. And I know it's not terribly exciting, but those players have a ton of value. And if your tackle goes down for the year, you lose a guy to an ACL or a torn bicep, you can get by with Jordan McFadden. If you got to play against Bosa or, Myles Garrett, Rashawn Gary, these true freaky bull rushers, you can help McFadden out. You can chip him, make sure that McFadden can get a little bit of help there. And against most matchups, I think he has the tools to hold up. So I really like him as a mid-round pick. A lot of people do, but he deserves some love in this video. All right, then we have a linebacker that I covered in my top 10 linebackers video, so I'm not going to spend all day here. Definitely check out that linebackers video from, 10 days ago, if you want to hear more about Servasia Dennis out of Pittsburgh. But in a linebacker class that is booty cheeks, let's face it, there are just not guys in this class that you can get terribly excited about. I get a little bit excited about Servasia Dennis, and I've been doing all these 7-round mock drafts on Patreon. If you guys want to check those out, it's patreon.com/thatfranchiseguy. We got 8 divisional 7-round mock drafts, so a 7-round mock draft for every single team. But this is a player that I end up drafting in like the 5th or 6th round for like every single mock draft for somebody, because I think he's a scheme-independent player. He's not the biggest guy, so if you're a team that prefers those 240-pound linebackers, you might stay away from him, but he, to me, can play weak side. He can play strong side. True, 3 down, strong side, weak side. It's kind of a dying term anyway, because everybody just runs some variation of 4-2 as their base defense. He can be a 3-down starter in the NFL. From a physical standpoint, he's extremely similar to what Dre Greenlaw was. He's got good speed, but nothing insane, but really instinctive in both phases. They didn't drop him into coverage a ton, so there's not a huge sample size of what he can do, kind of navigating to traffic, disrupting passes. I want to say he only had 1 or 2 pass breakups in his career, but they blitzed him on like a third of their coverage snaps for good reason. He had like 18 sacks in the last 2 years. He's a great blitzer. He has an awesome first step. He's quick. He's a difficult, elusive guy for running backs to get their hands on. So I think he can develop his coverage instincts. He also like would go out of his way to like make really instinctive plays. You watch that Duke game, there's a crosser coming across his face and he steps down and blows the guy up because it's legal contact within 5 yards. He completely deleted that route and then he just dropped back into his zone. You watch him in the game-winning play of that Duke game. They're going for 2 to tie the game, to force overtime. They run Philly special. He recognizes it, knows that there's really nothing that he's going to do just standing in his zone. He uses that great first step acceleration and flies to the, reverse and tackles the guy before he can get the throw off. He's super instinctive. He's got a great eye for the game. He has this infectious energy. Every time I talk about him, somebody steps forward that knew him in high school or knew him at Pittsburgh and is like, oh, Dennis is the best guy. Like, I'm sorry I don't have... Did I take a screenshot of it? Stand with me for just a second because I think I did. Dang, I didn't. But someone commented that, like, in the classroom, they were, like, reading off. It was an English class, and they were reading off poems, and this girl had a speech impediment and was really struggling to get through her poem. And Dennis gets up and, like, puts his arm around her as she reads, and she, like, became more comfortable and got through it. Like, that's just such a freaking cool story. So I'm really sorry that I didn't pull up a screenshot of whoever it is that commented that. And I'm assuming it's true. But just really cool. So, like, I love his leadership, team captain, instinctive guy, and he plays the run well. He's a little bit limited because he's 226 pounds, right? But he'll take on blocks when he needs to, but he also will shuffle. He'll do the little sidestep juke to kind of navigate blocks and make plays on the ball that way. Incredibly consistent tackler. He's got great length. He's got 33 and a half, 34-inch arms. So I really believe in this guy. In a linebacker class that just does not have a lot of excitement, once you get past your top 3 guys, you get past those 2 freaky athletes, Dorian Williams and Trenton Simpson, he's the first guy off the board for me. Dennis, I think he's athletic enough and super instinctive and a high character dude. I think he's going to succeed and eventually be a starter in the NFL. Then we're back to some trench warfare here with John Michael Schmitz. I had to get a gopher in here, but it's for good reason. He's been one of the best centers in college football for the last 4 years. He could have declared last year and probably gone in the same range. He's just so technically efficient. There's really one knock on his game. He's a solid athlete. RAS score 7, 8, 9. I don't think athleticism is his game or anything like that, but you can see like wide zone. He's got good get off. He can reach block guys. But in terms of like his natural change of direction, foot speed, if he's dealing with really quick pass rushers or maybe a looping stunt or a blitzing linebacker and he has to change lanes and shuffle over quickly, that's when you can see a little bit of slower feet. So that's like the one knock on him. There's going to be certain matchups and exploits on him as a pass protector, but in general, he's got a great anchor. He's awesome with his hands and understands the position extremely well from a pass protection standpoint. But in run blocking, I love what you see there. And I didn't quite go as far as comparing him to Frank Ragnow, who I think was just a little bit... What size was Frank Ragnow coming out? Ragnow's like he's one of the best centers in the NFL, so that's just an ambitious pro comp. But Ragnow, 6'5", 310, so a little bit bigger. But back to the run blocking, like he is clearly, I would only assume, has a wrestling background. Just like he has that really impressive core strength. He can latch onto guys when he's getting pushed one way. He just finds ways to stick on guys, and then he will, recorrect, he'll recover and continue to run his feet. I think he is the stickiest run blocker in this entire draft. He just understands leverage and has such high awareness for the position. I can't see him failing. I can't see him not being a day one starter. He reminds me a lot of Creed Humphrey in that way coming out. Creed was a little bit more athletic though. But to me, he's worthy of going in the first round. I consistently mock him to the Giants because it's like, I don't care if you're a center, a guard, a tackle. If you're a day one starter with like Pro Bowl upside, like you should be going in the first round of the NFL draft. And even if he's 24 years old, he's not the most remarkable athlete in the world. To me, he's a first round player. He's my number one interior offensive lineman. It's not even really all that close, to be honest. So I wanted to sneak him in here. And then my last guy, I wanted to end with like a kind of a super sleeper. So I will be honest. I moved Viliami Fahoko to the end here. I just got to his eval this week, and super fun player. And he reminds me a ton of a player that came out in last year's draft, Cam Thomas. Thomas was out of San Diego, and Fajoko's out of San Jose. Really unique play style. And you talk about a guy that understands the position. He just, he's not a guy that wins quickly as a pass rusher. He doesn't have the get off. He doesn't have the natural power. He's not going to run past and bend around guys. But he's got that slow burn as a pass rusher where he's constantly reacting to how the tackle is trying to attack him, or if he's getting down blocked by a guard. He just has this natural feel. He's quick. He's kind of bendy for a big guy. And he's got swims. He's got push and pulls. He's got spin moves. All these different ways that he can navigate his way to the quarterback. And it was incredibly effective. Fahoko over the last 2 years has 108 pressures and 20 sacks. I don't know if that's number one in college football, but I can imagine it's in the top 3 or 5 in those statistics. Yes, the level of competition is a little bit lower. The athleticism isn't great, but again, he's quick. He is 276 pounds. He's got good arm length, and he ran a 4.73. Like, he's actually a better athlete than Cam Thomas was last year. I think he's actually a slightly better player. And Cam Thomas stepped in. I thought he was a little bit overdrafted in the 3rd round, but he stepped in, and he was a sound player for the Cardinals. I think Fahoko can be a slightly better version of that. I love him as just a 4-eye technique because he doesn't have the speed and bend around the edge. I think, against like a wide 9 system, for example, like the Niners or the Texans, he can play on the edge early on. He can play 5-tech against the run. But when you get to your wide 9 and you want a 4-eye, a guy that can kind of line up in between the guard and the tackle, occupy space, and work his way to the quarterback, I think he can be an effective 30-plus pressure guy, kind of a 4th guy as a part of a defensive line starting group someday. If nothing else, he is going to be a remarkable early down player. He's big. He's tough against the run. He's really instinctive there. He's going to be functional as a pass rusher because if teams run play action or stuff, it doesn't make a difference for him. He's constantly working to the football and deconstructing blocks. So, like, if he's out there and teams run play action, he's going to be really effective in that regard. He's not the smoothest athlete in space. He misses some tackles. He struggles to finish sacks sometimes. He'll get in the backfield, and quarterbacks will just get away from him. He's not going to be a guy you drop into coverage, but I really see him as a 4th-round player. Consensus likes him, too. He's my 18th edge in this incredibly deep edge class. But just a player that, hasn't really gotten talked about. And I felt like this was a good opportunity to highlight a guy that I like as an early day 3 pick. I do have a huge list here of other honorable mentions. You guys can sort through this. These are all guys that I very much appreciate their game, and most of them I'm higher on than others. I believe in these players. Ultimately, the draft is about drafting good players, and between this honorable mention list and the 10 guys that we talked about here, I would hope to hit 60-70% on these guys. These are my most confident evaluations, the guys I really believe in at the next level, and these are always the most fun lists to come back to in a couple years, so it'll be fun to do that. I really appreciate you guys for watching. We're going to have really one more draft video here before we get to the live stream this weekend. I do encourage you to check out the Fully Inflated Football podcast. I just uploaded an episode yesterday going through my final top 25 receivers in this draft, and we talked about the top 12 offensive tackles and top 12 interior offensive linemen. So that's 50 total prospects we talked about there. Make sure you're subscribed to the Fully Inflated Football podcast, either here on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Again, check out my Patreon as well. We've got 4 more 7-round mock drafts to get through there. You can get access to my full draft guide, my full player write-ups for every player in this draft. But if nothing else, we'll see you guys on Wednesday for my last predictive mock draft. My only predictive mock draft, trying to take a look at what I think actually happens on draft day. And then I'll see you for the weekend. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed. Drop your comments down below who your favorite My Guys are in this draft. And we'll see you for the next one. Peace out.